a mobile phone left in a Chester taxi led to the downfall of a Salford drugs dealer. Kevin Ozemelam first came to the attention of police when the phone was handed into Chester police station on the 5th of April last year, with the messages on its lock screen which referred to drug dealing. Cheshire police said a man who attended the station to pick up the phone told officers his friend had asked him to go on his behalf and collect it. The man was arrested, had his own phone seized and had his home searched by police, where they found ecstasy pills, cannabis and ketamine, along with snapbags and digital scales. Messages on his phone also indicated the supply of coke, MDMA, ketamine and cannabis. The investigation led detectives to Ozemelam from Salford, who was arrested in Merseyside on June the 2nd and taken to Chester police station. The 29-year-old's phone was also seized, and investigators found contact that linked him to the man who had tried to collect the phone that was left in the taxi. According to Cheshire police, it appeared there was some coercion into the selling of drugs, leading to the first man being later considered as a victim, with no further action taken against him. Ozemelam from Salford was charged with being concerned to supply coke, ketamine, ecstasy and cannabis, and is also charged with assault and requiring a person to perform forced or compulsory labour. Ozemelam appeared at Chester Crown Court, having previously admitted the drugs charges. He was handed a sentence of just over 4 years in prison and was handed a 5-year restraining order. The charges of requiring a person to perform forced or compulsory labour and assault by beating were to remain on file. Detective Inspector Rupert Morey of Cheshire Police said the initial phone left in the taxi turned out to be good fortune for our officers, but not for Ozemelam. He is now paying the price for peddling illegal drugs in the community. We have taken a variety of drugs off our streets. He said we will continue to make every effort to rid the streets of illegal drugs and make life difficult for those intent on criminality. And in this next news story, a trio of dealers, including one from Birmingham who were part of a County Lines drugs operation supplying Class A drugs from the West Midlands, flooding a Staffordshire city, have been jailed. The 3 dealers were part of the Scribs drugs line supplying store contract with heroin and crack. Reese Edwards is 31 from Birmingham, Daisy May Ferniehow, who's 32 from Tewkesbury, and James Newson, who's 32 from Cheltenham, both in Gloucestershire, were identified as being linked to the Scribs line. Officers from Staffordshire Police's Major and Organised Crime and Road Crimes team stopped a car on the A500 near Cliff Vale in Stoke on Wednesday, March the 26th this year. They searched the black Vauxhall Astra and its occupants, which were Edwards, Ferniehow and Newton, and found Class A drugs and mobile phones. They were arrested and charged with Class A drug dealing and were collectively put behind bars for more than 9 years. Reese Edwards admitted being concerned in the supply of crack cocaine and heroin, driving without insurance and driving without a licence. Ferniehow pleaded guilty to charges of possession of crack with intent to supply, and Newton admitted to charges of being concerned to supply of crack and heroin, and all 3 were sentenced at Stoke-on-Trent Crown Court. Spokesperson for Staffordshire Police said 2 men and a woman have been locked up for their part in the movements of Class A drugs from the West Midlands into Staffordshire. Following a police investigation, all 3 were identified as being linked to a county line operating on the West Midlands into Stoke-on-Trent, known as the Scribs drugs line. So Reese Edwards, who's from Birmingham, was jailed for 3 years and 9 months. Daisy May Ferniehow got 2 years and 9 months, and James Newton got 2 years and 9 months. And police said we've launched Operation Target and have been working hard with neighbouring forces to tackle serious and organised crime locally. In this next news story, a man has been jailed for 13 years for the attempted murder of an 84-year-old shopkeeper. Richard Wilson, who's 28, punched the man 18 times, stamped on his head and kneed him in the face. The victim suffered a bleed in the brain as a result of the brutal assault at the shop in Inverness on the 12th of March last year. Sentencing Wilson at the High Court in Glasgow, Lord Colbeck told him, "I have not seen in my court an attempted murder as ferocious as this, apart from the one which involved weapons." Wilson had earlier pleaded guilty to an attempted murder charge at the hearing in Inverness. Lord Colbeck also ordered him to be supervised for another 3 years on his release. So the attack, which was captured on CCTV, occurred at around 9 o'clock in the morning after the victim started work at his nephew's shop. The court heard how Wilson came into the shop and demanded £50. The shop walker called a relative for help and said he was going to call the police. Wilson went behind the counter and grabbed the man by the neck, shoved him to the floor and began punching him. The prosecutor, Anna Chisholm, said he took several bottles of vodka and stamped on his head and body multiple times. He then made to leave the convenience store as the injured man attempted to use the counter to pull himself up, but Wilson returned to the victim and hit him again before snatching a bundle of e-cigarettes. He was then seen smirking and smiling as he walked out. A woman in the shop went to help the injured pensioner as Wilson then came back in again, and then she shoved a display unit between her and Wilson to stop him inflicting further violence on the victim. On being arrested, Wilson told police he had taken drugs and alcohol, adding he could not believe what he had done and that he was heartbroken. Lord Colbeck told Wilson it was an appalling attack on an elderly man doing his daily job and was made worse by you coming back to attack him again and again. The member of the public must be commended for her actions. Detective Inspector Caroline Mackay said this was an extremely vicious and despicable display of violence against an elderly shop worker. The man suffered serious injuries, and the long-term recovery time as well as the emotional trauma caused by this attack cannot be underestimated. So we thank the local community for their support during our investigation, and particularly the woman who came to the aid of the elderly shop worker. And in this next news story, 3 Scarborough drug dealers have been jailed for over 10 years between them for supplying coke and cannabis after detectives dismantled their criminal enterprise. Joseph Michael Hull, who's 23, of Newby, Hubert Yankowski, who's 24, of Eastfield, and Michael Ward, who's 21, of Flixton, all pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply coke and conspiracy to supply cannabis. Janowski also pleaded guilty to possessing an offensive weapon. All 3 were sentenced at York Crown Court. Hull was locked up for 4 years. Janowski got 3 years and 4 months, and Ward got 3 years. Yankowski was given a concurrent 6-week sentence for possessing the weapon, which was a knuckle duster he claimed was his mum's that she used for mashing up the chicken. In June 2024, detectives launched an investigation into a drug supply line known as the CJ line that had advertised drugs for sale in the Scarborough area. They were able to piece together evidence that proved all 3 were working together to advertise, supply and sell coke and cannabis across the town. The group used mass text messaging to advertise their illegal product for sale. They were arrested at their home addresses in January 2025 after detectives amassed evidence to obtain magistrates' warrants to enter their properties and carry out searches. They were charged and pleaded guilty in June 2025. Investigating officer Detective Constable Alfie Tomlinson of the Scarborough CID said these 3 men all thought they could become rich selling illegal drugs around Scarborough and Eastfield. Their criminal enterprise was bringing nothing but misery to the local communities whilst lining their pockets. Despite their initial arrest, Ward and Hull audaciously continued to supply drugs, showing total disregard for the law and trying to make as much money as possible. Today's result is the latest in a long line of jail terms handed out to convicted drug dealers and sends a clear and strong message to those who peddle drugs in Scarborough that you'll be found out and brought to justice. These 3 are now facing the consequences of their illegal activity, and I hope they use their time in prison to steer themselves away from crime and put their former criminal business mindset to a more legitimate use. So guys, here's a number of stories coming out from the streets of the UK. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.